Hello and welcome to the Headache Doctor podcast. Where on this podcast, it's our mission to educate and empower everyone with headaches and migraines so that you can break free from a life of fear of your next headache or migraine and dependence on medication. As you can tell, I am wearing glasses. I don't normally wear glasses. My vision is actually very good. I have 20/15 eyesight, and so I have never had the need to wear glasses. But I am wearing glasses, and we're going to talk about that because we have Dr. Michael Saxerud with us, and he is a specialist in understanding how the eyes function, a specialty of optometry called neuro-optometry. And so he takes patients through his process, and it is very, very helpful for people with headaches and migraines. And so I'll have Dr. Saxerud introduce himself. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me here today. Real pleasure to be here with you, Jono, and can't wait to talk about what you're wearing there.
So let's start out with give us a little bit of your background, because people watching this, listening to this, will think, okay, I've checked my vision. They have headaches and migraines, and they've probably screened that to some extent. Maybe some of them haven't. And so tell us, maybe in the context of your background, how you got into this niche form of optometry.
That sounds like a good place to start. So I graduated optometry school in 1996. So come August here, it'll be 30 years that I've been practicing. The first 11 years of my career as an optometrist, I did kind of routine optometry, right, or what we call primary care optometry, where we look at, does the patient see 20/20? Do they need glasses or contact lenses to see more clearly? Are the eyes healthy? Do they have dry eyes? Do we treat dry eyes, etc.? And primary care optometry obviously includes a lot more than that, but that's largely what people tend to think of when we're talking about primary care optometry. And then back in 2007, I had a patient walk into my office one day, and she said to me, I've had a brain injury, and I have very poor balance and dizziness and headaches, and I'm wondering if you can prescribe Prism that'll help me. And I didn't know about Prism per se for dizziness and balance. And what I learned in that exam is I couldn't help her. I didn't have the knowledge to be able to say, here's what's going on with your visual system, and here's how we're going to help. And I didn't find that very satisfactory, and to be honest, neither did she. And so we started doing some homework and looking around, and fortunately got in touch with a gentleman up in Denver who, of all things, was not an optometrist, but he had great experience in caring for individuals with these difficulties after a traumatic brain injury. And he knew of a technique that he shared with me. And I thought, okay, a non-optometrist is going to teach me how to prescribe Prism. I'm either going to be entertained or I'm going to learn something. I can't lose in this situation.
Yeah.
And it turned out I learned a lot. And so with this technique, we brought this patient back, and it was just that moment in your career where you're like, uh-oh, I'm really going to learn something today.
Yeah.
And we watched this patient transform through this process. And this whole neuro-optometric rehabilitation field grabbed me, and it has not let go. And so now that was 2007. So we're about 19 years of doing the neuro-optometric rehabilitation. And I loved it so much, I really tried to find a way to get my practice to be just that. And I have, for the last 13 years, been able to do nothing but neuro-optometric rehabilitation. I don't do routine care. I don't treat dry eyes. I see patients who have had neurological insults, and many without diagnosed neurological insults, but we're able to help the vision in some very interesting ways.
So why don't we start with defining what this means? Can we distill it down into, when we think about vision, we think about the things that we see and how clear they are. So when we're talking about the nervous system, their neurological system, and as it relates to the eyes and our vision and someone with a stroke, what are we talking about here?
Well, let's start with what most people think of with vision, and that's 20/20, right? And 20/20 means that when you are seated 20 feet from an eye chart, you can read the line that is 20/20, okay? Now, for those that like definitions, 20/20 letters, subtend 5 minutes of arc for you math people. For your non-math people, that means that that letter is 8.75 millimeters tall at 20 feet. And if you can see that small of letter, then that's 20/20. That means that you can see what the average person should be able to see in terms of detail at 20 feet, okay? So there's some really nice things about knowing that. It tells us the light is in focus in the eyes. And for those that the light is not in focus, we can utilize ophthalmic lenses to, prescribe for nearsighted or farsighted or astigmatism to help bring that light back into focus on the retina so that that individual can then see those 20/20 letters at 20 feet. The problem is with that test is that it's perfectly static. It's measured just like I am now while the patient is sitting in a sturdy chair. And the patient doesn't move. They're looking at letters that are very high contrast, evenly spaced, and the letters don't move. And then we ask the patient to do something that we all take for granted, and that is to name one of those letters at a time. So 20/20 means that when we're perfectly still and the letters are perfectly still, we can name one letter at a time. And that tells us very little about vision. The definition of 20/20 is static visual acuity. And the problem is we move, and life moves around us, and our visual system has to keep up with our movement and the world's movement, even when we're moving at the same time. So there's a lot more to vision than just that 20/20. Okay? So from a neuro-optometric rehab standpoint, we have to answer a lot more questions rather than just, can you see 20/20? We need to look at eye movements. Are they efficient? Are they accurate? We need to look at the ability to converge so that when we're looking up close at a page, our eyes can come in and we can see the letters and the words on the page as single rather than double. We need to look at the focusing system and how well that is able to bring that near set of words into focus so that we can read that. Okay, and so there's a lot of additional testing of binocular visual skills that we look at. But with a lot of these patients, it goes even deeper than that. And so what I really like to talk about is what vision really is and how it works in the brain, because honestly, we don't see with our eyes. Vision's a brain thing, okay? And over half the neurons in the brain, in one way or another, are involved with visual processing. Over half, right? That's a pretty good chunk.
Yeah.
And then when we look at neuronal activity in the brain, on average, 2/3 of the neurons that fire at any given moment are for vision.
Wow.
Okay, and that's not just sitting still and seeing a letter and saying it, okay? It's so much more. So vision really starts in the subconscious midbrain with the brain's ability to form a perception of self. Where is this body? Where is it in space? How does it relate to gravity? And it's input from the eyes and from the balance centers. A lot of input from the neck muscles and the spinal proprioceptors. But we have input from our shoulders and our hips and our knees and our fingers and our toes. Yes, our toes are involved in vision, right? So if we're really going to understand what's going on with vision, we got to look way, way past the eyes themselves. And we have to look at the patient as a whole. Now, when I say toes are involved in vision, if you extend your right foot out and look at your foot and place it on the floor now.
Yeah.
Your eyes have to feel the floor where your toes have to feel the floor where the eyes see it.
Yeah. What
if they don't? What if what the eyes perceive as to where the location of the floor is doesn't match where the foot feels it? What's the brain going to think? Uh-oh, something's not right here.
Yeah.
And in truth, this is a very, very common condition in patients that have had concussions, head injuries, strokes. We see it in multiple sclerosis. We honestly see it in a lot of different neurological issues that are occurring. Okay, so that's step one in vision. Where am I? Largely subconscious.
Yeah.
The second step in vision, which occurs even before I form the image of your face or the letter N in Novera on your shirt, is where is my visual world and how does it relate back to the perception of self, right? So we've got where am I first in the subconscious, and this is a gross oversimplification of where it occurs, right? But then we have where is the world, which largely occurs in our parietal lobes, okay? That's a separate pathway than the where am I. And then we have a third big pathway that in a little bit after we figure out where the world is going to tell us who and what is in the world. Okay? And so, where is self? Where is the world? Who and what is in the world? That's a lot going on in there.
It is.
And now our brain has to put all of that together into what we commonly call vision or perception. Perception is my favorite term because I think it's a more accurate reflection of the processes in the brain that lead to what we all experience. And then finally, the fifth step in vision, again, overly simplified here, is my ability to make sense of self and space and plan for movement in interaction with my world. I can reach out and I can move this microphone because I can understand where I am and where the world is. I can put one foot in front of the other and walk through a doorway because I understand where I am and where the door is. And what's really common in a lot of my patients who don't understand where self is they tend to be maybe a little more clumsy than the average person. Maybe they tend to clip doorways or corners as they walk through them or around corners. Maybe catch their toes going upstairs, right? And it really comes down to that uncertainty of the relationship between self and space.
Yeah.
And so when I'm looking at vision in patients that come in with headaches or dizziness or poor balance or nausea or all of the above, which is so often the case, the first question to ask is, does the brain understand where the body is in space?
Sure.
And again, the three big inputs, the eyes, the inner ear balance centers, and the neck.
Right.
In the sheer volume of neuronal input to that sense of self, those are the big three. But we can't discount the rest of the body as well in all of the sensory inputs.
Yeah.
So a very different way to, pardon the pun, see vision.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When we talked about this the other day, you had me, well, there were a couple things. You asked me to walk, and you were quickly able to diagnose, based on my gait, what visually my eyes were missing. There was a lack of something which was causing me to have more weight distributed through my right side. And then you also mentioned, those wrinkles on your forehead are like a sign that there's a level of stress through your visual system. At least that was how I interpreted it. And it was fascinating to me because you connected it back to, okay, when you're reading, you probably have a hard time because your vision's probably jumping more than it is, so that stability of vision is compromised. And then we did a podcast with Dr. Watt, and he had mentioned that reading was really challenging for him. And I've always gotten tired very quickly when I read, and I enjoy reading, so I've been able to compensate. But you connected all those dots for me, and I'm wondering, can you, are there symptoms or signs that you commonly see in these patients that you're working with that, I mean, I don't have frequent headaches or dizziness, but when we do ocular testing, like for example, look at an eye chart and try reading it while you turn your head. I'm really bad at that. So there are things, and then you really cut through that and said, well, all these things are actually symptoms that you should be aware of. Can you go into that a little bit more for the listener?
It gets to be quite a list, so I'll try not to make it too lengthy.
Okay.
But yeah, so the common things, again, clipping doorways or corners is very common. Tripping up steps, not knowing where to place the foot, right? Because if the eyes and feet don't match, it's kind of a guessing game. Sensitivity to light can be a very common issue that our patients have. Reading, of course, one of the more challenging neurological things that we ever ask a brain to do. We take these letters, which are just shapes that we've assigned meaning to, and then depending on what letters we put before and after it, the meaning changes and now becomes a word. And then we put all these words in sequence, and together they have to convey a meaning while we're moving our eyes efficiently and effortlessly across that page of print, and then understanding what those symbols mean, relating it back to prior context, and the brain will actually then kind of guess what's coming, right? And then we have to turn it into language, either internal or external if we're reading aloud. Neurologically, reading is an amazing process. So people can lose their place with reading. They can skip over words. They can skip lines when they're jumping back to that next line or reread the same line over. A real common thing is having to really reread 1, 2, 3 more times for comprehension.
Yeah.
When that material really needs to be absorbed rather than just reading for pleasure. And we see issues with dizziness. We see issues with kind of those moments of, whoa, I kind of lost myself there for a moment, are fairly common in our patients. And also just a lack of confidence. Because vision's job is to guide us through life.
Sure.
And if it's struggling to do that, we can look at ourselves and go, I'm kind of clumsy. I don't catch a ball well. You know, boy, when I throw to my friend, I often make him chase the ball down rather than throwing it to him. He doesn't struggle with that. Why do I? Why, you know, why can't I do these things as easily as those around me? And so we can see these struggles with confidence arise as well.
Okay. So explain to me these glasses I'm wearing, and why, what you did to them and why that's helpful.
So let's go back a little bit first, okay? So we talked earlier about the sense of self, and that is truly, truly the foundation of vision.
Yeah.
That has to work. If you build a house on a loose pile of stones, that house will not stand long. And if the brain doesn't have a true and accurate sense of self, it doesn't have a solid foundation. And that makes everything else in visual processing work harder. Okay, because it's trying to make up for that lack of that solid foundation.
Yeah.
So, as a neuro-rehab optometrist, the things I can change is where the eye sense self. So, think back to middle school and high school math, everybody's favorite subject, right?
Yeah.
If we draw an XY graph, and we have on there our markings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on both the X and the Y axes. If I put a dot up in space, we can measure to where that dot is, okay? And the reason we can measure to where that dot is and say it's X5, Y3 is because we're measuring from where the X and Y intercepts meet, the origin, right? And yes, I had to go back and look that up. I forgot what the center of the graph was called. But it's called an origin for, again, math people, right? But as long as that origin is a single point, that makes it a reference point. And from a reference point, we can measure to any point in space.
Sure.
And if the eyes, the balance centers, and the neck all have the same inputs, the same sense of self, then we truly have sensory integration, and self becomes a reference point. In a lot of the cases I see, the eyes represent self in a different location than does the vestibular centers, the balance centers, the neck, the hips, the toes, right? So if our eyes have one representation of self and the body has another, who's right? Who's wrong? Who's the brain supposed to believe?
Yeah.
Is it the eyes? Is it the balance and neck? Is it the eyes? Is it the rest of the body? Wait a minute. Who's the brain going to choose? A lot of times the eyes, because it is the single largest input to the brain.
Okay.
And now the brain's going, wait a minute. Balance and body say we're here, and the eyes say we're here.
Yeah.
And balance and body think they're right, and the eyes think they're right. And balance and body think they're right, and the eyes think they're right. And they get into this big shouting match, and the brain doesn't know who to listen to, and it's doing all this extra work trying to make sense of a self that just doesn't make sense. Now, if I don't know where I am, all of a sudden, instead of one nice X and Y intercept on my graph paper, I have two. I have two reference points.
Yeah.
Which makes that a variable.
Sure.
And if my eyes don't agree with the rest of my sensory inputs, I'm a variable. And if I'm a variable, I don't know where the wall is, or the floor is, or the letters are on the page are, or the corner of the door is, or where that lip on the step is. And it becomes a guessing game trying to interact with the world around me, which is the end result of vision, our ability to move through and interact with the world. Right? So if I'm just guessing and I'm walking through this doorway here in this room, sometimes I'm going to guess right and I'll go through without clipping it. And sometimes I'm going to guess wrong and I'm going to clip it. Right? And same with reading. If I can't understand where each and every one of those hundreds and hundreds of characters is on a page of print, how do I effortlessly move my eyes across them when I'm not truly certain where they are?
Right.
And this is what leads to a lot of these skipping words, skipping lines or rereading lines, that inability to understand that space and interact with it.
Yeah. Okay, so when it comes to, this is fascinating because the solution that you provided me in these glasses seems so simple. And the elements of self and who we are in relationship to the space around us, and those three systems, vision, vestibular, and the neck. When you were talking to us the other day, it made a lot of sense because we do want to feel safe. And when our environment around us is skewed and that yelling match is happening, the brain is having to work in order to understand what should be a basic understanding, right? The origin of that graph. I like that. And I explain this when people are trying to understand all of those extra symptoms involved outside of pain when it comes to headaches and migraines. Like, why do I have brain fog? Why do I have sensitivity to light or sound or nausea or these things that are the brain is interpreting something is happening, and it's not necessarily a reality, but the brain is having to work overtime for some reason, and this is one of those components that I think is right there. I mean, brain fog is a huge thing that our patients have, and I'm assuming this is part of the reason. The brain is having to work to understand what reality is around us.
So we often do see brain fog in patients that have these visual issues, right? And again, I want to emphasize when I'm talking vision here, I'm not talking eyes. I'm talking brain.
Yeah.
Okay? And we can see these problems I'm describing when the eyes don't sense self correctly. But if the eyes sense self correctly, we can get the same issues when the neck doesn't sense self correctly. Or if the eyes and neck are both on, but the vestibular system's off, we can kind of see these same issues, right?
Right.
And so, again, we got to step back and look at the whole of the patient to try and figure out what's working, what's not, and then how do we then individualize the treatment to help these patients move forward. When it's the eyes that are off, traditionally optometry has used prism, and not in a standard way. Standard prism is if a patient has an eye turn, right? If an eye turns out, we're going to see double.
Sure.
Well, we can use prism to bend the light, and if we bend it to the angle where the eye is pointing, they both receive the same image, and now the patient can see single again. So eyes can turn out, they can turn in, they can turn up, down, or any combination of those. And oftentimes, if that's present, we use prism to bend the light to achieve single vision. In the Neuro-Optometric Rehab Association, we do use standard prism when needed, But a lot of times we use what's called yoked prism, where the base of the lens is in the same direction. Okay? And at first, yoked prism makes no sense, because if I shift the right eye image here and the left eye image here, isn't that the same as this?
Right.
Well, no, it's not. Especially at that subconscious level of self. What we're really shifting is where the eye sense self. So we can use prism lenses to bend light. And if we bend the light the right amount in the right direction, if eyes sense self here and the body balance and neck sense here, if I shift that light over, all of a sudden, wait, they're not arguing. The brain has a better idea where it is in space.
Okay.
And yoked prisms are therapeutic, in that in time they become too strong because the brain responds. The eyes change their sense of self in space, and we need to go through a series of prism lenses. And it works. It's beautiful, but it's also time consuming because it takes a while for those prisms to arrive from the lab, and it also adds to the expense.
Sure.
And back about 2013, I met Dr. Bob Edwards from Fargo, North Dakota, who is now retired. And Bob tells me, Mike, you don't need to prescribe prism all the time. You can use tape to act like prism. And I'll be 100% honest, I didn't believe him.
Yeah.
I very politely listened and nodded and interesting, you know. And the whole time I'm thinking, yeah, I don't think so. But when I got home from that conference where I'd met Dr. Edwards, I went and I bought the tape and scissors that he recommended. And that week I tried it on a patient thinking, well, there goes nothing, right? This isn't going to work. And it worked beautifully. It worked like the prisms. And all of a sudden, I was baffled because there's no reason tape should act like prism. And yet it does. And I've been using this now for 13 years. And yes, it works like prism on most patients. We still have to prescribe prism for some.
Sure.
Okay, but most patients we can prescribe tape. And it's probably better termed a peripheral occlusion technique, right? Because it sounds a little more technical.
Yeah.
But it's really blocking a little bit of light in the peripheral vision. And that too, like the yoked prism, changes where the eye sense self. And so we apply the tape, eyes better matches balance and body. As the eyes relearn where self is, tape becomes too strong. A lot of times we'll see an overshoot, an overcorrection, and then we have to put tape roughly on the other side and kind of pull it back to center. And it can be between 3 and 5 or 6 rounds of tape to really kind of get that vision really dialed in with the rest.
Okay. How do you, so just to be clear for the listener or viewer, you put tape on these glasses. If you're watching this, you probably can't tell because it's such a thin strip of tape. But what you did on these glasses, you said it's probably the thickest strip that you would start with, correct?
It's about average thickness.
Okay.
I have done more.
Okay, yeah.
But 90+% of the time we start with that amount of tape or less.
Okay.
Because it doesn't take a lot to change a brain. And one of the key components of any type of therapy for these patients is to engage the brain at a level that doesn't cause the brain to go into fight or flight. Because if I push the brain too hard, or if you push the brain too hard, the patient comes back and says, that was a horrible week, right? And I typically see patients back at about 3 weeks. And they'll come back and say, oh yeah, I felt good for about 4 hours and I've been miserable since. Well, I pushed too hard. And if a brain goes into fight or flight, it throws out its arms and legs and it braces and it holds and it doesn't want to change. But if we can use a little bit of tape or a little bit of prism, the brain will go, that's not too much for me to deal with. Even in this state where I'm already struggling, I can deal with this. And then we can actually lead the brain forward through the therapy. And so the small amount is really pretty crucial to success.
Okay. Can you talk us through how you evaluate that? I'm assuming the devices you brought have something to do with the diagnostic tool? Or
They do, yep.
Okay.
Let me keep the camera on you. I'm going to grab this here.
okay. Have a little show and tell.
See if we can get this in place here. Okay. So what I have here is a lens kit. And this is something that every optometry student buys first thing first year, right? And we have all kinds of different lenses in there. And this is really my primary tool.
Okay.
Right? So I've got lenses for nearsighted, I've got lenses for farsighted, I've got lenses for astigmatism, and then I have prism lenses. And my kit probably contains more prisms than the average kit, but I do some pretty fun stuff. So we can start with prisms, and they look like any other lens, but a prism is truly a wedge, right? That's how it bends the light.
Yeah.
But these are very, very thin wedges. So you think of the Pink Floyd cover, right?
Okay.
How the light enters and comes out as a rainbow.
Yeah.
That's a 45 diopter prism.
Okay.
That's a big, big prism. And all prisms will cause a chromatic spreading of light, okay, but usually not enough for us to perceive that it's creating that rainbow effect. Okay. And so the prisms I typically start with are a half diopter and a quarter diopter. Okay. So 180 times less than that prism on the Pink Floyd album.
Interesting.
Okay. And again, it's keeping it within what the brain will accept. Okay. And so I watch patients' eye movements. We see if they're struggling to move the eyes more to the right or left or up or down. Are they struggling to converge? When we have them jumping back and forth between two targets, is it accurate? Is it instant? Is there a delay? Are there multiple jumps on the way where it should be one jump, right? And then we can say with confidence that that person struggles with reading just by watching that eye movement. But then we have the patient stand and we look at their posture.
Okay.
Are they upright against gravity? Are their shoulders level? Are their hips level? Right? And as they're standing there, are they calm? Are they loose? Are they at ease? Or are they tense, right? Because if we don't know where we are and we don't know where gravity is, we're probably not going to be truly upright against gravity. And now we have to hold this extra tension to keep from tipping over.
Yeah.
And then we watch people walk. Are they heavy on the right foot, heavy on the left foot? Are their arms swinging efficiently? Are their hands held straight or balled up? Or are they loose and comfortable? You mentioned the forehead earlier, right? A visual system that's not working hard will often have a smooth forehead, but one that works too hard isn't always like this.
Sure.
But as soon as we go to concentrate, we'll often see. So a patient can be sitting there, and I'm doing my examination, their forehead's flat, and I'll say, look at this up close, and we see this.
Gotcha.
And these are all the ways that the subconscious is communicating that this isn't as efficient as it should be.
Okay.
And then based on that walk, which foot is heavier, where the body's leaning, we'll put yoked prism on and we'll have the patient walk again. And then we'll alter that prism. We can rotate it. We can do more prism. We can do less prism. And we do that until that gait is really pretty smooth and efficient. The arms start to swing. The tension comes out of the hands. And then we'll put them in the chair and we'll give them a really busy page of print. The New Yorker magazine is phenomenal for that.
Okay.
Truly one of the only magazines that still has full page of continuous text, right?
Yeah.
Everything else is pictures and a few big words. So we challenge a brain with all those words. And then we have them read, and then we'll make little adjustments. And we'll figure out how much prism and in which direction the prism base is. And that's where we know that when the reading is better, when the walking is better, and the patient will tell you, this is more comfortable. And they can feel it right away. And that's one of the big secrets to my success is it's hard to get it wrong when the patient tells you it's right?
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
It's just my job to let them tell me what works for them.
Sure.
And then, depending on where the prism is, base-wise and power-wise, we cut the tape to a certain width and at a certain angle, right?
Okay.
And then we apply it to the lenses, and lo and behold, and it's still a mystery to me why that tape works, the patient functions better.
Wow. what is the prevalence of this type of neurorehabilitation optometry? Like, are people able to access this type of care pretty much throughout the country? Or is this, obviously it's not unique to you because you learned it from someone, just like our techniques aren't necessarily unique to us. But what would someone listening to this need to know or understand if they're going to try to find that in their area? Because a lot of our listeners aren't local to Colorado. Yeah. How would you answer that?
So the two main resources to use for that, the first is the Neuro-Optometric Rehabilitation Association. They have a website.
Okay.
And on there they have a practitioner locator. Okay, so you can put in your town, your zip code, put in within a couple 100 miles. There isn't a neuro rehab optometrist in every town.
Sure.
Not yet. We are seeing more and more optometrists coming into this field, which is beautiful. Here in town, we have several, some with more emphasis on different areas than others. But for a while, there weren't many of us, right? So the fact that it's growing is a wonderful thing. It makes it easier for patients to get access to the right care that they're going to need. So the Neuro-Optometric Rehabilitation Association. The other is the College of Syntonic Optometry. And Syntonics is another branch of rehab optometry that gets into visual efficiency, but looking at it from more, where is the autonomic nervous system, right? So those patients with dysautonomia. That's another way the brain spends way too much energy. And the College of Syntonic Optometry uses different colors of light to affect the balance of the autonomic nervous system. So if a patient is too much into fight or flight, there are certain colors that calm the brain and the body. If a patient is low tone, there are colors that stimulate the brain and the body. Okay? And what's beautiful about this, when we think about the rainbow, we have red, orange, yellow on one side. They're all stimulants. Some are sensory stimulants, some are motor stimulants, some have cross activity. The blues, indigos, violets on the other side are all suppressants, some sensory, some motor, some cross. And right in the middle is green, which is the great balancer. It's the one that kind of acts like glue to help the changes stick. And it also takes that system then when it's not too far out of balance and can really fine tune it. And so we utilize syntonic optometry quite a bit in rehab as well, because it's usually not just one thing that these patients need, right? So if you look at the College of Syntonic Optometry, they also have a website and a practitioner locator. And you'll find less syntonic providers in the country than you will Neuro-Optometric Rehab Association providers, but both are growing. It's really fun to go to these conferences and see the number of young professionals that are showing up with a new interest in this. And it really does my soul good to see more and more people entering into this field.
That's fantastic. If you're a patient here at Novera, we do have our green room that we utilize for patients that are light sensitive, or if we just want to increase their parasympathetic nervous system, right? And then we also have the different colored lenses that we can throw on you to see which one it has that sort of calming effect while we work on you. And they're kind of funny. They're from Amazon, and they're all heart shaped, so it's perfect for Valentine's Day. But it's true. It's such a simple tweak, and the brain's able to kind of take a breath. And our visual system, meaning our brain, it really is impacted by something so simple. I personally, I think I like the purple the best, potentially. Just yesterday, I was wearing them throughout the day just because it felt more comfortable to wear them than to have them off.
Yeah, light has such a profound effect, right? Yeah. And we have to think of light as energy. It's a wavelength, right?
Yeah.
And different colors have different wavelengths, so they all have different energies. And that's one of the tenets of why they have different effects. Within syntonic optometry, we tend to use either a light source with a glass filter in front of it,
Okay.
where you'll sit in a dark room and use it. There's also what's called a syntonizer, which is a tube with a light source and the glass filters. But it's nice because you don't have to be in a dark room, which can be hard to find in a lot of houses, right? Or we can also use these little goggles that look like the old 3D
That's right.
movie goggles, but they typically have a combination of filters. So this one actually has a sensory suppressant and a motor suppressant. So for that patient that's all wound up, this will often help to calm. This one has a sensory stimulant, and a pretty hot one, but then we put a blue filter in front of it, which is a motor suppressant, and that blue helps to take that really hot red filter that's going to be very stimulating and bring it down to a moderate stimulant. So we can combine filters to really fine-tune the wavelengths that the brain is getting to fine-tune that effect. And when we get the right wavelengths, what we can see is that over time we can take that patient whose adrenal glands are absolutely tanked, right? And their autonomic nervous system is way out of balance, and we can start to nudge that system slowly, and again, within what the brain will accept, back towards balance. And as that comes more into balance, that actually allows the adrenal glands to kind of recharge again, because it's not dumping all of its energy trying to deal with this system that just makes no sense.
Yeah. I think there's the process that you've laid out here is, I think, very digestible for people, in the sense that when we're addressing these complicated problems, we need to understand how the whole body is working and these different systems are interacting with each other. And the brain is fascinating because it essentially recalibrates, and it sounds like you're allowing it to recalibrate by, assisting with the glasses in order for now the light coming in takes some stress off, and then the brain accommodates over time. And then before we hopped on here, you said the time frame is about 2 to 3 weeks. Is that correct?
So what we find is that whether we use prisms or the peripheral occlusions, fancy word for tape, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks on average for a brain to make a pretty substantial change.
Okay.
Which, when you're going through this, seems way too slow, right? Because we want to be better yesterday. But when we think about it, and how many of these patients will come in with a year, 5 years, 3 decades worth of these issues, the fact that we see this brain change in 2 to 3, 4 weeks' time is really pretty miraculous.
Yeah.
And the other thing I really have to emphasize, this isn't just an eyeball issue, right? The eyeballs can be part of it. But we need to make sure that if there's a dysfunction coming from the neck, that patient is also getting that addressed.
Yeah.
Because if the eyes are off and the neck is off, and we get the eyes back on sensing self correctly, well, we're still off because this one hasn't been addressed.
Right.
Or if there's a vestibular issue, we have to have that addressed. And I've even seen where some orthopedic issues, which will lead to imbalance through the hips and the lower spine, can travel right on up and drag the neck and the eyes into it, right? So we really have to look at all of these systems and make sure it's not a monotherapy, right? I do my part, you guys do your part. Maybe we go see somebody who does vestibular training, right? And that's where we really get the good results.
Absolutely.
It's not a monotherapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all about that here. I mean, that's why you're on this podcast, right? Because we want to promote the things that are helping people that are outside of our traditional healthcare system, which really is just all roads lead to medication, it seems like. And so when we understand these systems in the body and the complexity to them, and we can really find some good results. And it seems like the common thread is that I'm interacting and interviewing providers that didn't necessarily get it from their traditional schooling, although that laid the foundation. It was that curiosity of someone sat in front of you and you didn't necessarily know how to help, but then you figured out how. And that curiosity component is almost throughout every provider that I've interacted with that is truly helping people with headaches and migraines. And so I appreciate that journey you've been on and how helpful you've been, over your career. And then we're referring patients to you, and then that partnership is really a wonderful thing for these people that have debilitating symptoms and are now able to live their life. What I'd like to do is let you just share a little bit about your practice and how people can interact with you.
So my practice is actually just a few minutes down the road from yours, which is pretty handy for our patients that have to see both of us. So my practice name is Michael Saxrud OD LLC. I don't have a website, and a lot of people wonder why. And the reason is because I'm not technologically capable. And we've been blessed. We have enough referrals that I don't need to drive a lot more people to me, because then it gets to the point where I can get overwhelmed. And then it takes me longer to get to my patients. I'm sorry, I think that's my phone going off.
Oh, you're good.
Forgot to silence that. So my phone number, 719-619-6737. Okay. My email is Michael Saxrud OD. That's MichaelSaxerudOD @gmail.com. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want new patients, but with the website, again, I don't know how to do one well, so I'm not going to dive into something I don't really know well. So reach out by phone. You can call or text that number. Email also works quite well. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to get back to you. You don't have to be on my schedule to ask questions to me. And we can talk about symptoms. We can talk about what the therapy really looks like, and to see if it's going to be a good fit for you before you make any commitment to want to come in or not.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I would encourage the listeners to reach out, because there's all sorts of potential for improvement. And if you found yourself saying, yeah, this sounds like me, reach out to us, reach out to Dr. Saxrud. We want to get you the help that you're looking for. So thank you so much, Dr. Saxrud, for being on the podcast today.
Truly a pleasure to be here. I also want to say a big thank you to you and your staff for the work that you do with these patients. Again, this isn't a solo type of an approach. And when we all work together, as we have been, that's where we really tend to get these patients to a level of, wow, most days are pretty good days.
Yeah.
And that is the goal.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening, watching the Headache Doctor podcast. If you have not hopped over to our YouTube channel, this might be the episode to do it, since we had some show and tell from Dr. Saxrud. As always, it's our mission to educate and empower everyone with headaches and migraines so that you can break free from a life of fear of your next headache or migraine and dependence on medication. I'll see you next week.